Why have you got involved in the MyMP campaign?
It's a good question. In some ways, I've kind of fallen into it through the campaign that's been growing in Stroud. But I think at the heart of it is that I would like to be, a politician. I would like to be an MP. But the way in which the current parties offer that role, it goes against my principles, because I really believe in giving power to people. I really believe in trying to, facilitate and support local activism and action, and this idea that we should prioritise parties over people is completely unacceptable to me. So on a personal principle level, I really think we have to reform how the MPs do their job, not just for the democratic connection, but also I think we've got these enormous problems, be it the problems with our services, be it climate change, etc. And I think that the outdated role of the MP is at the heart of why we fail to solve some of those issues.
Are people really interested enough in politics to take part in decision making?
I think sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. So around the Iraq War, clearly people were very, very interested. Around things like fracking in some areas, people are very, very interested. Around other things, they won't be. So it's not a consistent thing. I think we only want to give people the power when they want to take it.
Don't MPs really have a duty to represent their constituents already?
It's a really good question. There is already a code of conduct which says that MPs should give a primary responsibility towards their constituents, but we know they don't. The whips kick in, they prioritise the party allegiance before the constituents, and so actually, yes, they do. And in fact, I've been speaking to some lawyers who say that they think that you maybe could even take some MPs to court for going against the views of their constituents. So yes, they do, but in practice, we know that they don't.
Aren't MPs too busy for this casework and sitting on parliamentary committees? Isn't this just going to make their life even more difficult and complicated?
So firstly, in my view, MPs' jobs need a complete overhaul. They're completely outdated. This idea that MPs should be prioritising casework over representing their constituents is a complete anathema to me. And so in my view, we need to look at how MPs spend their time, and their primary responsibility has to always be to represent and serve their constituents. And for me, anything else that isn't part of that just gets in the way.
What if an MP fundamentally disagrees with what their constituents decide on an issue?
In my view, that's just tough on the MP. They should always be following their constituents' views. For me, that is what the job of an MP is about. So it's just that simple.
Well, this just mean that we get bad laws like bring back hanging?
These are exactly the same arguments that were used against the suffragettes and every other kind of extension of democracy we've ever seen. So this idea that we can't trust the people, I really think I find it quite objectionable. And actually, when you look at the evidence for this is really, really shaky. So there's an implication that you can trust the government more on things. So could we trust them on military intervention? Well, no, we couldn't on Iraq. Could we trust them on things like looking after our public services? Well, I think no, we can't. So this idea that you can trust politicians and you can't trust the people, I just don't buy that.
Do people actually want more direct democracy? Don't they just want their MPs to represent them to get on with their own lives?
Again, I think some people might want that, some people might not. But what's really important is that the people have the option of having the power. So on the key issues that they care about in their locality, they should have the option for being able to make the decisions. So again, it's going to depend upon the situation, I think.
Surely some issues dealt with by MPs are just too complicated or technical for discussion by voters.
It's possible that some of them might be, but again, if you look at how well informed so many voters are today, that doesn't seem to be the case. And in my experience in Parliament, I'm quite the opposite. My experience is that many MPs actually are not that well informed on the issues and they just follow the party line. So again, that idea that people are not well enough informed, we can't trust them, I don't buy that.
Don't MPs sometimes have to take urgent decisions and there wouldn't really be enough time for a wider consultation?
Sure, there might be situations like that, absolutely. But these are going to be on really rare occasions. The vast majority of things, such as the big decisions that people will care about, like NHS reform, like military intervention, tend to happen at least with time horizons of a few weeks, but often many, many months. So I think, yes, that might happen sometimes, but very rarely.
Well, let's just give the media even more influence and put the government even more deeply in their pocket.
This is a really good question, and being honest, it's something that I do have some concerns about, because anyone who says they know the answer to this doesn't know, because we haven't done it before. But there is a line of argument which says that actually by opening up power to many more people, it makes it much harder for the media to influence us, because we're all engaging with such a huge variety of media sources, different websites, different newspapers. So the ability of the media to influence public opinion as it could when we all watched BBC One, ITV, or all read The Sun, those days have changed. So maybe it's a concern, but there's a large body of evidence which actually says that no, moving it away from a small number of people to a large number of people will limit the media's influence.
How can you be sure that the technology you might use for this voting process is both secure and fair? Again,
if you look at the current system we've got, the ability for someone to walk up to a polling station, pretend they're someone else, it's happened all around the UK over the last decade. There's been numerous scandals. So what we're offering is going to be better than what we have at the moment. But again, look, it's not perfect, and we're going to have to be working hard to ensure that it's better. But what we're proposing here isn't, we don't say we've got the answers. No one's got the answers. But what we have got is a way of starting to answer the question of how do we make our MPs more democratic. And that, I think, is what's important.
What about people that don't have access to a computer? Aren't you going to lock them out?
So the first kind of rule of the MyMP campaign has got to be that it's about being as inclusive as possible. So that's got to be our real priority. We know that using mobile phones and computers is the best way of doing it from an inclusivity perspective. But sure, as we develop it, we're going to need to work with charities whose job it is to help people get online, to help people to be empowered, to ensure that we are involving as many people as possible. But again, the current system we have of going to a polling station, I mean, that is very, very excluding for a very large number of people. So what we're proposing isn't perfect, but it's so much better than what's currently offered.
Underlying all these questions really, and what you're proposing, is really a dismantling of the party whip system that is central to the party system. What reassurance would you give to people who might be nervous about that?
Well, first thing, Lee, when I've been speaking to MPs about this proposal, many of them have been relieved that we're giving them an opportunity to create a cast iron relationship between the constituents and between them as members of parliament. So they'll be able to say to the whips, look, I can't go against my constituents. And so for me, again, that's a primary responsibility for the MPs. It's not really about supporting the whips. And again, because we have this crisis in our democracy, it's no good just saying it's okay, we should keep the whipping system. I think it's about saying, look, how can we change that to be having this strong relationship between people and the politicians?